How do you think the general population will look at those early Bitcoiners?
I think my my biggest wish is that they don't take a look and they just because I think it's kind of cringe. I think that, and this is maybe because the op return debates is so fresh and it's happening right now, and I am totally cringed out by the way these debates or discussion has happened. But I think that it all depends on where Bitcoin is in 10 years from now, because if Bitcoin succeeds, all of us will be looked at pioneers. If Bitcoin doesn't succeed, we're going to be cast as naive ideologists who didn't know about the real world. So it all depends on how this thing eventually ends up being. But I think Bitcoin is going to win. I think Bitcoin is going to just continue to grow. But that's also, I'm saying, I'm confident and I'm saying this with all the information that we have up until today. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I might change my mind about Bitcoin. But ever since I started my Bitcoin journey in 2017, and I ride those waves and adoption cycles all the way to 2025 or mid 2025, where we are today, I've never been more bullish on Bitcoin. And I really see, like, you know, my from my understanding of Bitcoin, which is the monetary properties, the predictable issuance, the cap, and how Bitcoin is a savings technology, and how savings technology is the catalyst for so many improvements in life. That's not just because of Bitcoin, because of the catalyst that Bitcoin represents in order for people who are poor, who are forced to live day to day, are now available. Are now they have now the possibility to plan ahead more than one day in the future. Just those things is extremely transformational, and I don't think people realize the extent of how much that changes your whole perspective, how much that changes your life. We're talking about stuff like you can now earn money digitally, and the hardest money ever created, and you can be paid by anybody around the world, which means that you now have an appreciating asset that you can save in and plan for the future, but you don't have to leave your country or your family to go work in another country in order to get paid. So that is just insane. If that had existed back in 1989, when my mom had to make that choice, if Bitcoin existed at that time, we would have never left Argentina, and Argentina would be more prosperous than it is today. This is just one example that I'm giving you. Take that example and then extrapolate that into 1,000x across the entire world, and just that is insane. Okay, and if things don't get drastically changed when it comes to the protocol, to the consensus, to Bitcoin itself, then yeah, I truly believe we are going to be seen as visionaries. As we were all playing a part in Bitcoin's success, and the world is a better place because of that in 2035. If things drastically change and all of a sudden, I don't know, there's a consensus around not having 21 million as the cap, then I'm going to stop believing Bitcoin, and I think people looking back will look at us as fools. So, yeah, I don't know if this is a good question, but it was a really good question that you're posing, though. It's a very interesting thought experiment.
Do you see indicators from all those medias and narratives that you're seeing for the Bitcoin adoption going forward, or is it like a leading or like more of a lagging indicator of like, okay, there's Bitcoin adoption happening and that's why media is kind of reporting on it? Or is it maybe even the other way around, where there's a small media coverage and then this actually drives more adoption?
Yeah, that's the whole reason I created the Bitcoin perception platform, because there's a big difference between what is being discussed in Stacker News, on Reddit, on X, just take a few of the channels that I'm sourcing, versus what is being covered in the legacy media. Two scenarios within that gap is the things that gets discussed on Reddit, Stacker News, X, whatever, never makes it to the legacy media. They're just not covering it. Nobody will know. It's just a fringe topic that stays within the community of people who are more in tune with what's happening at Bitcoin on a daily basis. But then the stuff that do get covered in the legacy media obviously comes way later than when it first started, being discussed in like the base layer, I would say, of the Bitcoin discussion, which is the people, which is the different players, which are the different founders of different companies and power users and influencers. That conversation is where it starts. And obviously, in the middle, you have crypto media, you have the coin telegraphs, the coin desk, and stuff like that, who constantly are looking at the conversations that are happening, and they are obviously pretty good at picking up things that are getting momentum, or things that are pretty interesting, new proposals, or new companies that are building something new. They cover that in legacy media. They will never touch that unless these companies become public, and or raise a bunch of money, or something like that. So, and that's okay. That's the flow. That's the information flow that goes between these like fragmented sets. They all have a connection to each other, but it's very fragmented. So it's not very easy to see if you're only visiting your timeline on X, or just visiting, or like typing coindesk.com on your browser and checking it out once in a while, or I don't know, seeing maybe some big influencer retweeting a video clip from CNBC about an interview that you might see. So that's why I created the perception platform as well, to just have everything in one place, and to be able to see these straight lines, even though there's that line is going through a lot of fragmented sections of the overall discourse. So yeah, I think it's okay. I mean, you know, I think that the Bitcoin framing in legacy media, like mainstream financial outlets, like I said, they see Bitcoin through a very specific lens that makes sense to them. So it's going to be price, volatility, and then how Bitcoin is somewhat related to like macroeconomic trends. And I think just this narrow focus has actually helped with institutional adoption. But obviously, it frames Bitcoin, narrowly as a speculative asset. But as the media landscape overall continues to keep fragmenting, I think these narratives will diverge, and some outlets will just double down on the Bitcoin is risky or Bitcoin is volatile storyline, to keep these legacy audiences engaged, and then others will evolve to reflect Bitcoin's expanding utility. Now, what these expanding utilities will be, time will tell, because a lot of interesting stuff are being built, and is going to be put to a test whether these things that are being built are actually being adopted. Right? Like I talk, if I put on my Blockstream hat right now, this is what we are doing in Blockstream, right? Like we are building what we believe is the future on Bitcoin rails, and we are actively engaging people, prospects, to integrate our technologies, because we believe this is hyper Bitcoinization looks a very certain way, and you need to build a lot of the a lot of the utility that you see in traditional finance. You need to build that on Bitcoin rail, but you got to make it better. So that's the bet, that's the risk, that's kind of like what we are building towards. And it's a nice there's a nice relationship between adoption of new technology and the media who covers that technology and its users. So it's super interesting to be a marketer or communications person at Blockstream at this very moment as well, because you need to know the institutional lens. You need to understand why financial outlets are covering Bitcoin as NGU. You also need to understand the fragmentation effect, like how different audiences will see different narratives and be okay with that. And then you also need to understand like the inevitability of polarized Bitcoin narratives and why that's not necessarily bad.
Interesting. Because you brought it up, how do you think hyper Bitcoinization looks like? How do you see that? Does that mean that everyone is into Bitcoin? Like, is that a requirement for hyper Bitcoinization?
I think hyper Bitcoinization is kind of like hyper fiatization, where you just do stuff and you don't really know or understand how fiat money works. It's just the value that you're transmitting, and you have a understanding of that value, and you have no idea whether the institution that are lending you money or the corporations that are custody of your money. You don't understand. Like, I mean, 99% of people, Bitcoiners excluded, they have no idea about these things, right? Like, uh, people still to this day, they go to the bank and they ask, "Hey, I want to take out $2,500." And they are shocked when they're like, "Oh, you can't do that," or they say, well, "Okay, we can do it in 48 hours. You just need to fill 17 pages of paperwork first." They're shocked by that because they have no idea how the system works. And I think hyper Bitcoinization is still going to offer the same things. There's still going to be lending. There's still going to be borrowing. There's still going to be private loans being issued. There's still going to be equities being issued, and people buying stock into companies. So a lot of these financial instruments that have existed for a while, I don't think they're going to go away in a hyper Bitcoinized future. The only difference is, which I think is the main difference, is Bitcoin is going to be the underlying technology, it's going to be the underlying protocol, and it's going to be the underlying asset. So if you get a fiat loan, the collateral is Bitcoin. I like that collateral way more than other types of collateral. So uh, it's not about like breaking down the system. It's about just making it more efficient and improving on the things that needs to improve. And I think having the hardest money uh, as the underlying asset, and that can also serve as the protocol, I mean, that's going to change the world, man. It's the same example that I that I talked about 10 minutes ago about one person being able to charge a service in Bitcoin, and just by the fact that this person is getting the hardest money ever, now has a chance to plan ahead and actually save in Bitcoin. That makes a huge difference. It's a simple transaction done on Bitcoin with Bitcoin, but it's so transformational just because of the nature, the properties of the asset, and the properties of the protocol, that it's going to be life changing. And I think the same thing when you scale up to TradFi, legacy finance. Just the fact that they connect, that they integrate Bitcoin is going to make their services so much better and more efficient. So I think that's how hyper Bitcoinization looks to me, at least.
It's super interesting. There are so many great narratives, and you just brought us a really, really good one. I like that narrative of the individual and what it brings him in the actual day-to-day life. Like not just like some numbers and like, oh, like your inflation and this and that. So like what actually does that mean? Do you have, and maybe this is the narrative that you just brought to us, but do you have like a personal favorite Bitcoin narrative that you're like, okay, if we all hammer that down, we'll come quicker to like Bitcoin hyper Bitcoinization?
Yeah, honestly, I think we need to. If I had to choose one thing, and it's going to be a little bit biased because I I I I I have been stacking Bitcoin since 2017, so I have a survivor bias, right? It's not as easy to say what I'm about to say for someone who just entered and might go through a bear market in the next 6 to 12 months. Who knows? But savings, Bitcoin as savings technology, I think is the number one thing, because the the concept of saving money is somewhat easy to understand. It's easy to understand why the money that you get today, you should not spend everything right away, and try to save a portion of that every single day, so you grow a bigger stack of money that you can then uh, use in the future for any choices that you want to make. So you are not forced to make any choice. It's a choice that is deliberate and voluntary, because you have the power, you have the opportunity through savings to make choices and not let someone else make the choice for you. So I think that is way more. It's easier to teach than saying stuff about this is how peer to peer works. This is what decentralization means. Oh, this is SHA-256. This is Base 58. Let me sit you down. Let's go and read the white paper together, and let's talk about cryptography and why that is important. Let's talk about mining and why mining is so important. I think just savings. Bitcoin is a hard asset because its circulation, new units being made every day, is predictable. You already know what's going to happen. There's no central committee that are deciding, oh, today we're going to just print a 21 million today, and which in effect dilutes the value of the money that you're saving. So if we can get that, if we can get people to grok that, then that's a super important aspect, especially in Latin America or the global South, or whatever you want to call it, the third world, where the concept of saving is almost non-existent because people are forced to just use all the money that they get in every day in order to cover basic needs. So in terms of like what is the easiest concept that also has the biggest transformational effect, I think Bitcoin as savings, cold storage, and just hold it, keep accumulating, and just do that for years, is the one thing that will lead us the fastest to hyper Bitcoinization. Everything else, and I'm sorry, but like how to run a node, how proof of work works, cryptography, all of that stuff is just not going to get people faster to having Bitcoin and believing in Bitcoin. So yeah, savings technology for the win.
Absolutely, I see that with the data on my YouTube analytics. Also, that's what people like to see and click on, especially when we look outside, because in the Western world sometimes it's almost seem outside of Bitcoin a little bit of a luxury good. Bitcoin, I hear that from my family. Oh, like you have to have a lot of money to get Bitcoin, because like you have to have real estate and stocks, and then you can also diversify in Bitcoin. Which is a really weird narrative, but it definitely exists. And I see that a little bit less from people that come from Argentina, Latin America, Turkey, from other parts of the world where inflation is just a lot more crazy. Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.